Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos pregame walkthrough brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. Ben Grant joined as always by JB, and we are here to get you set for Sunday night's road game in Calgary against the Stampeders. Lots to talk about this week, as always. We're going to talk about Chad Kelly and when he will or should start practicing. We're also going to talk about the little mix-up on the sideline that people have been asking me about all week that I guess happened between Coach Dinwiddie and looked like Tejan Allen. We'll give you, what we saw from that situation and why it may not be as big a deal as some are making it to be. We haven't had a chance to really talk about Rasheed Bailey, Amani Dennis, Jay Person being released. That happened late last week. Also, Jared Wayne, remember that name, the receiver drafted by the Argos last year, was released by Houston. I've been getting questions, we'll say, about updates on that scenario too. Plus, Christian Malfachuk, you've watched him all week long, or the last 2 weeks, I guess, as he went around the CFL, going to all 9 CFL stadiums, setting a Guinness record in the process, but also collecting money for cancer. He ended his trip at BMO Field, and we'll just check in on that. Plus, we've got Pick 6, we've got a game preview, injury reports, OCDC, one thing, predictions, put me down for 20, and CFL picks. All that more coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. JB, one of my favorite things about Something in the Water is that they've got great beer, but it's that they've got so much of it. You guys have heard me talk about Longboat Pale Ale. It's the beer that was made for fans of the Double Blue. It's a fantastic beer. It's my default when I go in there. There's no question. However, there's other stuff that you can try too. So if you feel curious one day, and they encourage you to drink curious, they've got a plethora of options for you. Tortuga is one that I just tried recently that I think has got a really nice taste to it. And they have seasonal stuff that they bring in, and sometimes beer is there for only a limited time, and then they've got their year-rounders as well. Like Hazy Maitland's always available. That's a great beer. And if you're into stouts, they've got a wonderful breakfast stout that they do, which has won awards, actually won a global award. So if you are into beer and you want to have a just sit down and enjoy yourself on a patio on a nice summer day in Toronto, Something in the Water has got the answer for you, and they've got so many to choose from. So make sure you head down there in Liberty Village near Lamport Stadium and steps from BMO Field, Something in the Water Brewing. All right, JB, let's get into it. A lot of stuff happened like right after we recorded last week, so we kind of have to go back to last week's mail a little bit to get some of these topics done. Ryan Dinwiddie was on TSN 1050, I think it was Thursday last week, talking just in general about the quarterback situation, and he was asked about Chad Kelly. And I thought that he said some things that were sort of interesting to me that has been a discussion point for people around the league this week, and I thought we would go back and forth on that a little bit. So I just want to read you a quote he said. So Dinwiddie said on the topic of Kelly, "I assume the league would potentially allow him to practice before his actual suspension's lifted. Player safety-wise, the kid's got to at least get out there and get going. You can't expect him to come back week 1 and play. Even if we get him a few weeks of practice time, it'll be more practice roster type, scout team type of work. We've got other guys ready to play, but let's get him out there and get him acclimated to it again. I think it's more a player safety thing. We've got to get him on the practice field before we play him." So just before we get into like what will happen and what should happen, the Argos are, as I understand it, and as I understand the collective bargaining agreement, Chad Kelly could be out there practicing right now. He's not, but he could be, because suspended players under the CBA are indeed allowed to practice. And so what Dinwiddie's asking for isn't, I don't think, really permission from the league, but more, I guess, the league giving them direction. Like, is this going to be for sure after 9 games? Because they left that part, the league left that sort of vague. But everything that we've heard from the Argos leads me to believe he will be the starter after 9 games. And if that's the case, like, when do you bring him back to start practicing again?
I think he's probably, well, I'm going to say, I would bring him back the week before he was going to play. I think the quarterback position, you want your starter to be getting all the reps. So if he's not going to play, I don't really see tons of value of him being out there. So for me, I would just have him come in the week before he's due to return and have that full week of all starter reps.
And I believe the Argos are coming off a bye that week as well, so that might feed into it nicely. But I agree with you. I think, he's been staying in shape from everything that I gather. He's spent a lot of time in Buffalo, New York, and he's got quarterback a trainer down there, and he's been keeping active and fit, but he's also been keeping up to date on Argos film and what's been going on with the team, obviously. But I think bringing him back too early, maybe that's a distraction, maybe that causes unwanted attention. You and I know, like, we've been at Argo practice a lot of times. It's just us sitting there, but whenever there's an event, a story or something, and how how the media is sometimes, like when there's any sort of ruffling of feathers or a scandal or anything like that, suddenly everybody shows up. So I don't know if maybe just going with your plan might be the best way from that point of view too, just to keep the players focused on what they're doing, so they're locked in. And he's also not taking reps away from your quarterbacks who are playing up until then, who clearly need as many reps as they can get. So I guess that's the best way.
I think Dinwiddie, to me, when I read that, he, I'm sure, frustrated by the lack of communication with CFL operations and the lack of specificity or detail about when is the suspension ending. Have things been fulfilled to their delight or liking? It was very frustrating. You're running an operation here, and you would like some, official declaration of what the timeline is. That I took that to be more a question to the CFL to send a timeline, or at least send some sort of official information about when the suspension is coming to an end, because it's very CFL, to be honest. But I'm sure it's very frustrating to not have communication with CFL ops.
And I totally get that too. And because everything we've heard from the team is that he has been keeping up with all of the requirements that go along with the suspension. And he has been checking all those boxes, and everything seems in line. And so, yeah, it's a big deal for Coach Dinwiddie, for the league, because, the league, I guess, are within their rights to suddenly say, you know what, we've decided it's 11 games. Like the way that they've worded it kind of sounds like that they can kind of do whatever they want with it. And I think if you are trying to, especially as you're patching stuff together here, we're coming off a week where neither Cam Dukes or Nick Arbuckle look particularly good, and he's trying to kind of measure out these next couple games. Like, we just got to get to here, but he needs to know where that finish line is. It's really tough to plan as a head coach if you don't. And so I think you're right. I'm sure a lot of that comes from the frustration of, like, can you just give us a date here? Because it is, the onus, I think, is on the club to set the day themselves for when Kelly returns to practice and resumes his activities with the club. And just last thing before we move on from that topic of conversation, in terms of like getting reps though too, like, is 1 week, you're happy with that? Was 1 week's enough for him to get up to speed? Is that, you would feel fine with just those 4 or 5 practices?
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as he has been, he's got the playbook and he has film, and he's been staying in shape and he's been drilling. I do think a week of practice is the same as coming off an injury. Of course, there's going to be some rust. I don't think there's any way to avoid that, because, gameplay can't be, created anywhere. But I do think, if he knows the playbook and has been keeping up on film, that a week of reps will be fine.
And see, I would suggest, and again, because of the bye week, I think that's going to work out great, because I think really you want 2 weeks of like, let's go really hard. And so that's going to be on him, maybe using that bye week to really fire up that level of conditioning and intensity, because we see, like, usually players coming off the 6th game, they're allowed to practice 2 weeks leading up to that. And that's to avoid injury, that's to avoid setbacks and stuff like that. So maybe that would be something that he would do going forward. So that's my thought on how it's going to go. I do think the Argos will do something like that, but they're well within their rights as long as the CFL kind of gives them that timeline to set that up. Because if they know for sure, okay, it is 9 games, then I wouldn't be surprised to see Kelly out there soon, just trying to work his way in and get up to speed on everything else. So JB, something happened during last week's game that I didn't see at all live, and after the game, I kind of found out about it, and people were all over social media about it. And when I finally got to see it on the TV coverage, when I rewatched the game this week, looking at the TSN broadcast, I didn't actually think it was as big a deal as what people were making it seem like on social media. And I'd like to hear your thought on that too. And this wouldn't be the first time that social media was making a very big deal about something that I didn't think was as big a deal. But in this case, so the situation as I saw, and the clip that people are referring to, it looked like DeJon Allen and head coach Ryan Dinwiddie were sort of jawing at each other. They were being held apart. And I just want to go through kind of what led up to that and then what I saw, and then we can kind of break down, how we interpret that. So it was in texting with you that I actually got the idea for where to go back to in this to look at it, because you said to me in a text, you thought this might have stemmed from a previous play. And I think you're absolutely right. What I saw happen is Toronto was moving the ball really well. They were going out of no huddle at that stage. And then suddenly Adeboboye got stopped in his tracks by Tony Jones, linebacker for Winnipeg. He came off the edge and he was untouched. And it looked like on that play that either Micaiah Polk has got to slide over and pick him up, which is a pretty tough ask, but well within the possibility for protection, or that DeJon Allen should have fired out instead of double teaming and climbing up to Big Hill, which he did. He should have come out instead and taken Jones. So one of those two has to be the solution. You can't let a free will linebacker run in untouched towards the very hole that your running back is heading to. So when he got to the sideline, that's where it looked like the altercation occurred. And then you had Landon Rice kind of walking DeJon Allen away, and it looked like Isaiah Cage was sort of standing in between Allen and Dinwiddie, and then looked like, I think it was Coach Maxey that was seemed to be trying to cool things down a little bit as well. Like, is that how you saw the situation, first of all?
Well, yeah, I had to, I was curious as to who he was going after, because he was clearly going after somebody. And then once I was able to see that play had stuck in my head, because I thought, well, that's a very odd way to draw up the blocking on that play, to leave a free rusher in the lane that you're about to rush in. So I remember that play sticking in my head as like, that's clearly not what the plan was. And so the two immediately made sense to me to connect. I don't know if they do or not, but it came after the Argos had made a big play, and I'm sure Coach was pretty hot about the offense, and they were finally getting a little momentum, and they were finally doing something well. And then immediately after a nice play, they run that terrible play, and the guy gets tackled before he gets the ball practically. And that probably fired Dinwiddie up quite a bit. So I felt that he was expressing his belief in the importance of them having good plays linked together to DeJon.
And that could have been the difference. Like, they were driving and moving the ball so well. It's like the only time all game where the offense really felt like it was clicking, and then suddenly that turned into a field goal instead of maybe what could have been a touchdown. We'll never know.
I mean, I would assume Coach would know the blocking on that play. I assume
he would.
That's what he was explaining to DeJon Allen, that he disagreed with his choice.
And I think to a lot of people that maybe haven't spent time on the sideline as much as you and I have been privileged to over the years, maybe that looks a little bit more, maybe it looked more violent or more confrontational than it is. This sort of stuff happens on the sideline with a lot of frequency, and I didn't find it at all, like, you don't want that. Ideally, you don't want players and coaches yelling at each other. Like, it means bad things are happening generally in the football game, but it's really not that uncommon. It happens quite a lot, and it's especially as you go higher and higher up, that does happen. And a player like DeJon Allen, who has been the best offensive lineman in the CFL and is playing at an extremely high level, was having a bad game. He did not look like the normal DeJon Allen. I don't know if he's fighting through something or what was going on with him. And maybe he's got some frustration as well, and the coach is frustrated because the offense isn't clicking. And to have some tempers flare up on the sideline like that, I really don't read much into that at all. It's not like they're swinging at each other and stuff like that.
And he's not coming after Dijon for not playing well. I think that's clearly an execution frustration,
Right.
right? That he's like, that is not how we block that up. So, essentially we are fighting for our lives here. And, if we're a team that puts up 35, we can kind of laugh about that mistake in film, that's fine. But I mean, there's just no margin for error for this team. And to have a nice drive destroyed by a lack of execution, on top of other execution issues. I'm sure coach was pretty hot. You could tell he was pretty hot coming into this game. Like any good coach, I don't think he enjoys losing very much.
And no, he's a highly competitive. He's a fiery guy. Like I love Dinwiddie as a head coach. He's like the opposite style of coach from me in a lot of ways. But I really like the way that he goes about it. But he is fiery. He is intense. And so yeah, we saw a little glimpse of that, I guess. But yeah, I don't think I don't think that's turning into anything. I don't think that's going anywhere. I think that's just
No, I think it's fine.
you see that all the time on a football sideline. But ideally, the game's not.
Which is why which is why the guys were sure to kind of get in between them so that it doesn't, you never, what you worry about in those kinds of scenarios is that it becomes personal. And that can happen sometimes that people bark a little too long at each other. So once the barking was over, I think that's fine. And the guys were smart to kind of break it up before anybody says something they regret.
Yeah, and you have leaders on the team to do that. And it's also, and again, we didn't see, and this is also the curse of TV, is that you don't see everything as well, like what led up to that and everything else. And, maybe it's a situation where the hierarchy wasn't being respected or something like that too. And that's sort of what we saw was like, you can't just walk away while I'm talking to you, something like that. I don't know. We didn't,
Sure, of course, exactly.
I didn't see any of it live. And so this is all really speculation, but I will tell you, it is not at all unusual. It happens all the time on a football sideline. And so, yeah, I would, unless it's something that's happening every week with the same two guys, then it's not something that I would really be concerned about at all.
No, and just to kind of wrap it up, that is the head coach's job, right? Like as the offensive coordinator, you would not normally have a positional coach getting in a player's face at that level of anger, because you have a different relationship positionally, where head coach or offensive coordinator absolutely would be the one to be bad cop.
This past week, we really didn't have a chance to talk about 3 releases. We addressed one a little bit in our post-game walkthrough episode. Rasheed Bailey, Amani Dennis, Jay Person, all released. And I just want to go through this a little bit. I'll go through Bailey fast because we did talk about, that's the only one that we had a chance to actually talk about a little bit. But Rasheed Bailey's release, I've been getting asked about that. I was just, before recording this, I was just on with Winnipeg Sports Talk, and they were asking about it because guys around the league can't believe, like, why would the Argos move on from Rasheed Bailey, who's leading the team in receptions, and clearly Toronto's struggling on offense. And what I've said to everybody, which is what I said on the post-game reaction pod too, it was just simply a numbers thing with American receivers. You had one guy had to go between these 4 because they just didn't have space for it. This is a roster that was built to have 2 Canadians at receiver, and that's the best way to construct this roster. They've got such a wealth of talent at Canadian receiver. You want 2 of those spots to be designated Canadians, giving you other really nice strengths around the roster. And so that meant that you had Rasheed Bailey, but then you got DeMonte Coxie, DeVaris Daniels, Janarian Grant. One of those 4 guys had to go. And even with Rasheed Bailey playing well, even with him leading the team in receptions, you can't move on from DeVaris and Coxie. And you're certainly not going to move on from Janarian Grant, who was on the verge of setting a record. Like, that was the only answer. And so while the optics of it aren't great, would it have been better if they'd let go of DeVaris or Coxie or Janarian Grant? Like, no, of course not. And so that's the only solution. And you're seeing right away, like, he still, as we record this now, has not signed with anybody, which surprises me. I did think he would sign with Winnipeg like as early as Monday, but they've got Lucky Whitehead that they've brought in. And remember, not a lot of teams were banging down his door either. These are transactions, when we talk about American players, we've seen this happen a number of times where the Argos Argo release somebody, the fan base gets upset and like, how can you release a player of that caliber? But then they sit there. We saw it with Sean Oakman. It was weeks before Edmonton picked him up. And with Rasheed Bailey, I don't expect it to be that long, but it was some time. Tavares McFadden was eventually picked up by Ottawa, but then he was released. And he's back in Toronto and looking great again. Like these guys aren't typically scooped up immediately and turn in all-star careers elsewhere. It does happen, but generally, when you're making a decision, like the organization knows more than we do. They know more than hopefully than everybody else does. And so when they make a decision to move on from a player like Rasheed Bailey, I think especially with this management, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, like, there's got to be something to this. And it doesn't take you long to look into it to see, okay, well, that, as tough as it is, that actually makes a lot of sense.
He was squeezed up by numbers. He is a good receiver. He's not great. He's good. There's no doubt he's good. But being American, he'll probably not be signed until a team has an injury.
And Amani Dennis, Jay Person, this is guys that were given a little bit of a shot. Amani Dennis especially actually got a chance to get out there. And this goes back to your strategy of continue to churn. He didn't seem like, and Jay Person obviously in their time, didn't seem like players that were necessarily able to contribute right away, and they weren't necessarily seeing what they wanted to in terms of development. And so you move on and you continue bringing in new guys and seeing what you can make work. And as guys come off the injured list too, you're going to see this happen over the next few weeks with a few other players as well. So I can't imagine you're surprised by either of those moves either.
No, I think neither had popped, and you're looking for, I think you're always looking for lightning in a bottle down there, because not to be too blunt about it, but essentially everybody at that level is sort of the same player. So you might as well keep churning and see if you catch something different.
Yeah, no, exactly that. And the Argos continue to make moves, continue to adjust their roster. Guys are brought in, spend a couple of weeks, out they go, and someone else comes in. And the core of the team largely stays the same. But yeah, that's just one of those. It's just a part of professional football. And I encourage the Argos to do that. It makes sense because, like you've said many times, like every so often, there's a lottery ticket that hits. And you find a guy that you just brought in to kind of kick the tires on, and he really turns into something. And if you've got as much faith in the scouting staff as I do, then you want these guys, bringing in those guys that they have marked. They've seen something. They're like, let's get this guy in at practice and see what he can do. And if it's not, it doesn't turn into what you thought it might be, yeah, let's buy another lottery ticket, I guess, in that sense. Speaking of players that have been waived and teams moving on from, Jared Wayne, the wide receiver, selected in the second round of the 2023 CFL draft by the Argos. It was their first draft pick for that year because they didn't have a first rounder last year, and so a lot of eyes were on Jared Wayne and his time in Houston as a Texan. He was signed as a UDFA, first of all. He was waived, and he's been signed and waived a few times. And just this past week was released once again with an undisclosed injury settlement by the Houston Texans. We're getting closer to it being time where you might expect a guy like Jared Wayne to explore options and maybe come to the CFL, but I just don't think we're quite there yet. We've seen, with the example of like Sage Dockstader, for example, who we've been waiting a couple extra years for, it's not immediate. It does take time, but you continue to monitor guys like this. And so people were asking me, like, is Jared Wayne going to get up here? Is he going to be here in a few weeks? Is he going to be up here? No, like absolutely not right now. I would be really surprised if that happen, because this is a time where there are injuries, where there's roster turnover. Jared Wayne, Houston's not the only team that's been interested in him. Someone's going to take another look at him, bring him in. And even if not, he'll probably wait around for the first few months of the NFL season, seeing if there are injuries. Maybe he gets added to someone's practice roster. I just don't see anything happening with him this season. Maybe next year, if there's still, if he's still in the same situation, we get to next spring and he hasn't been picked up, then yeah, I could totally see something like that happening. But I don't expect till at least the end of this NFL season for Jared Wayne to even think about anything NFL. And the conversation's bigger than that this year too, because everyone's talking about Nathan Rourke. Is he going to come up in the CFL? It's the same thing, and even more pronounced with Rourke because he's actually been in the mix a little bit, and I think he's a higher profile player than Jared Wayne. And so if Rourke is going to wait through the year, and I totally think he will, then there's no reason why Jared Wayne wouldn't do the same, looking for that NFL opportunity. JB, the PFF honor roll this week featured 2 Argos. Would you have thought there was any way in the world, after what we saw last week, that both of them would be on the offense for the Argos?
Well, I felt, I'm trying not to be too snarky here. No, that did surprise me. I didn't think the offense played particularly well.
No, they didn't. And there were a couple guys that Sean, and I think they were marked rightly so, and that's Isaiah Cage.
I might have said Carey, truthfully.
Yeah, and Kadeem Carey's the other one. And Kadeem Carey did play well. He had a great game. He averaged over 6 yards a carry, made some really nice decisions, lowered his shoulders when he needed to, turned on the speed when he needed to, had a couple nice bursts. And Isaiah Cage's run blocking was really solid all game too. He was fine in pass protection. Actually, I thought the line in general played pretty well. A little weaker on the right side last week, but the honoring of Isaiah Cage, I think that probably is a lot to do with his run blocking, and then Kadeem Carey, the beneficiary of a lot of that. He made a lot of good decision making too. So those guys both honored. Kadeem Carey's score was 81.9 and 83.6 for Isaiah Cage. But I was a little surprised that nobody on the defense, because the defense played extremely well. They created 5 turnovers. They had a pick 6. And yet it's tough with those PFF grades. If you're, even with those big plays, if you're not consistently throughout the game making highlight reel plays, and they're only honoring one guy in the honor roll at your position every week, it's very tough. And usually everyone on that list has either, multiple touchdown, multiple interception, multiple sack game. But I thought we might see Serezna or maybe even tea time, Tavares McFadden getting recognized. But yeah, no such honors for them this week. JB, Chris Jamalfachuk finished his Guinness record-setting tour of CFL stadiums. The record was set last year, and it's not official yet. It's going to take a period of weeks before Guinness gives them the official thumbs up. But he did manage to make all 9 stadiums in less than 2 weeks' time to be able to string together this record, which is really impressive. But it's not about setting the record for Chris Jamalfachuk. It's about raising funds to fight cancer, and CFL fans fight cancer, an organization that everybody who follows the CFL has heard of, and the great work that they do. And Chris has been with them for 5 years, and this was part of that initiative. And he was able to raise $20,000 towards cancer research, which is just a phenomenal amount. The CFL fans have been so great with donating. You see on every broadcast, there's Chris in that same jersey, so he's easily recognizable. He's got that bucket in front of him, and fans are coming from every which section to stuff money into the bucket and to raise. I think he said $7,000 in cash from fans across the league, and then another $13,000 in donations from his website. And this doesn't end now. Of course, this is a year-long initiative, but what a great start. They're looking to raise $40,000 for the year, and to be able to get a jump start of $20,000 like this right away, maybe they can surpass that amount. But yeah, I love seeing that, the tour of the stadiums. And what's funny is that he said he's been to all 9 stadiums before, which is so few people have. He's like, oh no, I've been to all 9 stadiums, but to actually go around collecting money and in this shorter period of time was different for him. But at least he knew kind of what to expect. He had some measures in place. There's an article on 3 Down Nation about his time here, and one of the most interesting things I saw was his comment on barely making it to the Red Blacks game because there was traffic from Montreal to Ottawa. Like, no big surprise for you. I'm sure you've traveled that route a number of times, and he barely got there. He had a friend waiting for him at the gate to run him in with his ticket there, and did get through in time. One comment that stood out, he was very complimentary about the CFL and the stadiums and the fans, but he did say that Calgary is in desperate need of a new stadium. And this is going to transition us into our next segment, which is Pick 6. Pick 6 brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. We pick a question every week based on the question that we most want to answer, or one that ties well into our show. And in this case, this is just the perfect segue from Chris Jamalfachuk into our question, which is from Connor Sauvé. Connor, who has the question, Since I got back from visiting Saskatchewan and Winnipeg, my question for you guys is, what's your favorite CFL stadium to watch a game in? And before we address that question, JB, Connor has won a 6-pack from Something in the Water Brewing, and I would encourage you, if you would like a 6-pack from Something in the Water Brewing, you've got to take advantage of this. Look for our tweet every week. We put this out and ask for your questions, and we'll pick one of those questions every week, and the winner will get a 6-pack of beer from Something in the Water Brewing. So, JB, you've not made the trip around, but you've seen all 9 stadiums certainly. Before I get into my answer, which is going to be a little bit more detailed, maybe, are there any stadiums that stand out to you where you love going to that place, where you really get a good game time experience from?
You know what? I really like Hamilton Stadium. As much as sometimes I roll my eyes at Hamilton, I think it's a great stadium. I think it's really easy to get to. It's easy to find parking. It's nice. It's really well designed. It's a really good experience. I think they have a hell of a stadium.
They do, and it's so much better coming off of Ivor Wynne too, which was not a great stadium. Like that, Ivor Wynne was a dump.
No, the Donut Box has got a nickname. I mean, yeah, I think they hit a home run with that place.
And the uniqueness of it being like plunked in the middle of a neighborhood. Like it looks like someone made a mistake in some sort of like Sim City type game where like, whoops, put my stadium in the middle of the neighborhood by accident. But it works. Like there's something charming about that. And I always, we're there usually really early. And so we can find street parking usually a block away from the stadium, which is perfect for us. But yeah, there's lots of parking in all of the lots around the place. You don't have to walk far for it. There's a good tailgating scene there. I don't have anything bad to say about Hamilton Stadium as a whole. No, that's not true. They should have rotated it. I hate the wind at that stadium. That's the one thing that does bother me. It is a wind tunnel and it can get really breezy in there. That's the only thing I have to say. Maybe they could have had the stands go up a little less high and had stands bookending either end to block that wind a little bit, but it's a really nice stadium. I've been fortunate enough to go to all the CFL stadiums, and I'm just going to break this down for you, Connor, in a slightly different way. For my looking at it from like a media perspective, Hamilton is absolutely the way to go. If I'm general media, like what JB, when you go there to cover the game, the seats that we get there are fantastic. You're so high up, which makes our job so much easier. We're looking for the X's and O's. We're looking to see what's happening down in the field. And you feel like you're like right above them because it's close proximity to the field and you're way up in the sky. It is by far the tallest of all of the press boxes. And where the general press box is pretty close to the middle of the field too, if you get a good seat. And so you do see everything pretty well. The food's there well. They treat you really well there. So, and from a general media perspective, I think Hamilton is certainly right up there. From a radio broadcasting standpoint, you cannot beat BMO Field. Mike Hogan and I for the broadcast were right at the 55, like right at the center of the field. And the way that BMO was built too, you're not too high where you feel like the game itself is just a rumor that you've heard about. You're like right on top of the game, literally right there, and you're in the stands too. Like you can see the fans right below you. They can yell stuff up to you. You can have your window open. You can have your window closed, however you want to see it. So for me, from a broadcasting standpoint, BMO is definitely the way to go. Great atmosphere too. And then the nicest stadiums on the whole, Mosaic and Princess Auto Stadium are stunning. They put every other CFL stadium in a different league, in a different class. They look like a smaller version of the nicest NFL stadiums. They're both relatively newer buildings, but they've done both of those buildings right. Just absolutely fantastic. Everything in the stadium is great. The only thing I don't like is where the press boxes in those stadiums tend to be down towards the end zone. So you're kind of in a bit of a corner, and so you don't have a great view there. But for a fan, those stadiums are phenomenal, and they don't get overly windy as well. You can sometimes in Saskatchewan, but they've done the best they can to kind of dig that into a bowl to prevent that. For me personally, in terms of like the pregame stuff, like I'm not a traditional tailgate guy, so I will shout out Vancouver and Montreal because I like the fact that you are right in the heart of the city and then you can just walk up to the game. So I think there's something to be said for that too. BMO kind of has that going on during the CNE, but otherwise, BMO's not tough to get to. I love the environment of BMO Field. I love that it's in grass. That's one of my favorite things about BMO. But I would agree with Tim Alfachuk in that Calgary is the only one that I don't have something positive to say. And so if any stadium needs to be rebuilt, renewed, reconfigured, re-something, it would be Calgary. Every other stadium in the league, I'm more than happy to go to watch a game, either as a broadcaster, as a fan, you name it. We're really lucky to have 8 fantastic CFL venues to watch football games from. All right, JB, let's get into this game. Game preview, I guess what we're really talking about this week is, what do you do at quarterback? And in watching practice today, it looks a lot like it did last week, where maybe a starting quarterback isn't officially announced until the end of the week. Maybe this is something that Coach Dinwiddie is going to kind of hum and haw on, and also not give Calgary an advantage in knowing who to prepare for. And maybe like last week, we see both quarterbacks get some time as well. So to me, midday Wednesday, that's my thought. I think that's how this is going to go. I would imagine that Cameron Dukes will start and that Nick Arbuckle will come in at some point. Is this a mistake in your mind? Would you go differently with this? Would you look at Brian Scott? Would you just start Nick Arbuckle and give him all the reps? How would you handle this situation, Coach JB?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't think they think Arbuckle is the answer, but I don't think Arbuckle is the answer. So I wouldn't give him all the reps. I think they still like the option game they have with Dukes a little bit, even though he's a bit spooked when it comes to interceptions. So my guess is that they will probably start Arbuckle, and if it's not going well, bring Dukes in the second half, and that they've basically just decided that these two guys are the same guy, and we're going to kind of use them interchangeably, and doesn't really matter which one we start and which one we bring in, and we're just gonna MacGyver this thing until we get our quarterback back.
What I like about it is that it forces Calgary's defense to prepare for two guys with different skill sets. They're not like the completely opposite, but they're not the same guys. Certainly, you do have to look out for different things from both guys. So that I like, and I think maybe that's what Coach Dinwiddie's holding on to as well, because we saw last week like neither one of those guys looked particularly good. We haven't seen Dukes look great for a few weeks now. He after that awesome start that he had to the season, and Nick Arbuckle's played smart football. He hasn't made mistakes, but they didn't have an offensive touchdown last week, and so you can't look at it and say, well, this is the answer.
No, I think exactly that. I don't think they feel he's the answer. I think he gives them a bit of change of pace because he is willing to pull the trigger quicker than Dukes. But I do think that they like the option game with Dukes, and I would probably run more of that option game with Dukes. But yeah, if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have any quarterbacks. I think that line is very true.
Well, that's the danger, and that's the part I hate, is that I don't like splitting reps. I don't like long-term platooning. This isn't long-term. We led the show with talking about how this is just a few more weeks of managing through this. But it's not an ideal situation where nobody's getting the majority of the reps, where you're really just splitting between Dukes gets half the first team and Arbuckle gets the other half of the first team. And again, we got a few more days of practice. Maybe it doesn't get handled this way. This was their first practice of the week. So maybe it doesn't go like that moving forward. We'll have to see. But the way it looks right now is like that is the plan. This reminds me a lot of last week. So I expect to see both guys. So yeah, I don't like splitting it, but I think if your plan is, look, we got to do everything we can just to limit Calgary's defense and put them in a situation where they're not happy about not knowing who we're starting, if that's the advantage that you're going to try and play, then I guess this is the way you have to run it. So we'll see how it works. But I think both guys and the offense in general, like DeVaris Daniels, if you got a chance to see the second episode of the Argonauts show this week, DeVaris Daniels had a line in the locker room after that loss to Hamilton where he said to the defense, we owe you one. Defense, we owe you one. We'll get you back. And it didn't happen this past week. It's got to happen for the offense at some point, because the offense owes the defense two now. They owe the one in Hamilton, and they definitely owe them for the win that they got over Winnipeg this week, because it was all defense. So, we'll see. It's going to be tough, though. If one of those... Let me ask you this. If one of those two guys is going to step up and have a big game this week in Calgary, which one would you think it's going to be? Who's more likely to have a big game in Calgary?
I think Arbuckle. I think Duke's. I mean, look from where I don't know. I mean, I'm just watching on TV, but Duke's looks shot. He looks like his confidence is gone. I think all those interceptions he threw against Saskatchewan, he doesn't look like the same guy. Where Arbuckle is, you know, slinging the rock. So if he were to get hot, I would say Arbuckle has the better chance of getting hot and making big plays because I think he's trying to, and Dukes just won't pull the trigger. He just he's hanging onto the ball for 4 or 5 seconds in the pocket. He that just is not going to get it done.
And you've got Arbuckle up against his former head coach, up against his former team. Like maybe
No.
that is,
Uh,
maybe that's something of
maybe.
the spark. But going to Calgary is never something I look forward to. In covering the
No.
Argonauts, but we'll see how that one goes. Let's transition into injuries. Nothing major to talk about this week. For the first time in a while, like we talked about how guys are going to start coming back, but for the first time, there's no one major that we're suddenly worried about. Like the Argos, for as physical a game as that was last week with Winnipeg, got out of it relatively unscathed. There were a few guys banged up today at practice that were maybe going limited and taking it a bit easy, but there's nobody that I looked at and I thought, you know what, they're not going to be able to go this week. Like I feel pretty confident that it's going to be the same group that took on the Blue Bombers last week. And the exception to that is they're due to get back Flo Arimolade. And he's been practicing for a couple of weeks now as he prepares for return. I can't say. It's hard for me to say from the sideline. I'm not there. I'm not a trainer. I'm not a coach. I don't know for sure. I would guess that he's going to be able to go this week, though, just based on how hard he's been going and how his level of practice has been elevating every single day over the last couple of weeks. I think he's going to be ready to go, and that could be a real impactful addition because we saw one game this year where you had Serezna and Flo together, and man, was that special to watch. The Toronto Sack Exchange was in full business in week 1 of the season, but then he's been away. And remember, they got 5 sacks this past week without Flo. You add Flo into that mix, and you've got Serezna. I don't know if that would mean they don't dress Woody Barron. We'd have to see how that would work. But man, those guys were fun to watch together. So I can't wait. I hope Flo Arimolade is good to go. I think he will be this week in Calgary. And we tell, and all these former Stampeders going back to, there's not as many as there were at one time, but there's still a number of former Stampeders that are going back to Calgary, going back to McMahon Stadium, which we've already covered should be replaced. JB, let's get into OCDC, your favorite segment on the show. Oh, wait, I got to cue up the music and the theme. It is time for OCDC. All right, for OCDC, it's really simple for me this week. I don't know if it's a little bit more difficult for you looking at these, how to shut down both of these offenses. Probably not. We'll do the offensive side first as we look at Calgary. So for the Calgary Stampeders, if I'm the Calgary coaching staff looking at how to solve this Toronto Argonauts defense, it's pretty tough, but I think still the area to try and exploit is the outside of the secondary. I know Tavares McFadden looked really good last week. Benji Franklin, I thought, had one of his best games last week. But I still think if you're looking for some kind of hole on D, it's not on the D line. It's not in the linebacker room, certainly. And the middle of that defensive secondary is pretty solid. And so I think if you're going to try and exploit something, it's the corners. So there's a few ways that I do this and a few ways that I think Calgary can actually play into their own strengths while attacking the corners of Toronto. I think one is you start with the outside screen game, receiver screens, which I know Toronto likes to do. Calgary can work that too. Jake Maier is no stranger to throwing passes that don't cross the line of scrimmage. He's certainly got that in his arsenal. I expect to see a lot of short passes, a lot of quick screens, and then you're going to complement that with the over-the-top stuff. You're going to have double moves. You're going to have one play at least at some point where it is the fake screen and go. I just think if you're trying to put those corners on an island and make them make decisions, that's the way that you try and attack this. So that's my number one plan for Calgary. And like I said, with a lot of other teams playing Toronto, I really don't try and run too much. You maybe test it a little bit early just to see, because certainly without Jared Brinkman in there, it's not the same. We saw that last week. Oliveira was able to run unlike anyone else, and that's because you removed Brinkman from the situation. But you can't base your entire attack, if you're Calgary, on that run game, because McManus isn't going to allow that. The middle of that defense JB just won't allow that. Even without Brigman, you'll get your yards. So I'm not saying you don't try to run at all, but I think your focus is going to be on the pass and getting it out wide. JB, what does the Calgary defense do to stop Toronto this week?
I think you're looking at kind of a mixture. Toronto is not very scary or very threatening from an offensive point of view. So I think defensively, you're looking to dictate here. I would definitely bring, run defense, run blitz on first down. I think when Toronto gets second and long, they are in a load of trouble. If there was ever a team that needed to stay ahead of the stick. So I think on first down, if you bring that heat on the run, and then you drop back and you just look to get the quarterback sack if everybody's covered. So I think that pattern works really well until Toronto shows a little more ability to move that ball on first down passing, and then you change up a little bit. I'm still fine with letting the runner run. At the end of the day, I think that you're looking to take away the pass. You're looking to play a lot of man and get there with, get there rushing 3, get there rushing 4. And I'm actually okay with allowing them to run. I don't think that's going to hurt you in the long run in terms of getting defeated. But I think if you do, until Toronto can change that, I think you're going to largely just alternate there. And I think that pattern is going to hold you in good stead.
On the other side of the football, for Toronto, I think it's, again, simple. I think the up-tempo works. I've been saying this for a few weeks now because every time there's been a point in every game over the last 4 games where Toronto has gone no huddle, and it has worked. Every time they've been able to move the football. I want more of that. Like, why? And I don't really get why you wouldn't bring that back again. I guess because maybe like speeding up the clock and having your offense run more plays isn't necessarily the advantage for Toronto, but it has worked and it's kept the ball moving. So why get away from that? And I think both of these guys can run it. We've seen Dukes run it. We've seen Arbuckle run it. Run up tempo. That's number one for me. And then I think for Dukes, I want him to run the football. I think he obviously he can throw it as well, but I think there's an advantage on the ground. Force Calgary to spy. They're pretty quick to do that. We've seen Cameron Judge serve as a spy. They've actually rotated spies too. They've done that a few times this season, where they'll actually have 3 or 4 different guys spying. But Judge is the one that does it most commonly. See if you can force Calgary to budget a spy, and that will open up things in the passing game too. And if not, run. Like, Dukes is good at that. And so run around, make plays, buy time, take off downfield, get some rushing yards. And for Arbuckle, I want him to take deep shots. Even if it's not there, give your receiver a chance to make a play. I want to see DeVaris Daniels going up for footballs. I want to see Coxie in one-on-ones. If you get those guys isolated, either of those 2 guys, Makai Pole too, actually, any one of those 3 guys, you got them isolated one-on-one, take a shot. You know what? I'll throw Richie Sindani in there too. All 4 of those guys, one-on-one, deep shot. Just keep hammering away, because it's not a wasted play. Like, the chances are it wasn't moving anyway. The offense has been so I don't know, unthreatening that it may not have been going anywhere anyway. Spread that defense out and you're going to hit a few of these. Your receivers are too good not to win those contested catches. So take a shot, keep that ball in play, let your receiver go up and catch it. So that's my offensive plan this week. Where are you going for Toronto's D, JB?
Well, Toronto always runs into this sort of Dr. Mayer or Mr. Hyde scenario where, Mayer, and that's what Calgary runs all season. Sometimes he's an all-star quarterback and they win. Sometimes he's the worst quarterback in the league and they lose. Unfortunately, he seems to be the, Mr. Mayer when it comes time to play the Argos. I think you have to keep him under control. I think even though he did not play very well recently, I think you have got to be a pass-first defense against him. He can put up 350. He can throw for 3 touchdowns, even though they don't move the ball in huge, deep passes. Their offensive statistics are at near the bottom of the league, except at percentage and time of possession. So they are a team that likes quick passes. They're a team that likes to go, in the short passing game. And I think I would focus on that. I would focus on him not getting into a rhythm, because when he does, he is a problem, and he has somehow an all-star within him. So I would really focus on making sure that you're taking away those passes he uses to get into rhythm. Um, and again, cheat more to the pass than to the run. And really do everything you can to get after the quarterback. They don't give up a ton of sacks, but I would really, really bring more heat than maybe they would normally do. I think you absolutely have to get him a bit rattled, because if you do, he does have a tendency to kind of, be inertia. Like, if he's good the whole game, and if he's bad the whole game. So I think you want to make him the bad Jake Mayer early, and keep him at that.
My one thing for this week is no turnovers. And I was going back and forth between asking for sacks or asking for no turnovers. And those are the two things that I think are going to be a big part of this game. But I think no turnovers is more important. And as much as I am frustrated by what I've seen from Dukes and Arbuckle over the last week, and certainly against Winnipeg, they have been relatively safe with the football, and that is a key. That allows you to hang around. It allows the rest of the team to make a play. Maybe it's Janarian Grant that makes a play. Maybe it's a pick six like we saw from Tavares McFadden. It will keep you in games. And so I think that's what I'm asking for this week is don't turn the ball over. Keep that football protected and safe. And at the end of the day, you're going to have a shot to win that football game. So that is my one thing. What is your one thing, JB?
Keep Jake Mayer under 250 yards passing.
250, and that should be doable. Although again, like you said, if it's suddenly it's like super Jake Mayer, then it's going to be.
Yeah, I think much like with Winnipeg in the running game, I think if you're right around there, you've got a decent shot. I think if he's at 350, you've awoken the monster and you lost.
My prediction.
I don't know what to make of that guy. He must drive them crazy.
Oh,
he would
sure,
drive me crazy.
I know.
If I had to watch him every
week. I know.
Week.
Sometimes there's a few guys like that, but he's like high and low.
I don't know if there's anybody quite like him, because when he's on, you're like, where is this guy?
Yeah.
He's running and he's turning and he's running. He's on the run and he's throwing 40-yard bombs, and him and Beggleton are going for 185 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he just, he looks like Rourke. And then other times, he just. Like that Montreal game. I mean, he just couldn't have looked worse.
And that ties a little bit into my prediction, because he's coming off one of those games where he looked terrible last week in Ottawa.
I watched it.
That was not a good football game.
God,
if you're
a
Calgary Stampeder.
Yeah.
They were terrible. That was the worst. That might have been it's among the worst performances we've seen in the CFL this year from Calgary, and they've had some good wins. So it's not like Calgary's a bad team, but man, they look like a terrible team last week, and that makes me really nervous. And playing in Calgary for the Argos is 2021 aside, where they squeaked out a win on the last couple plays of the game. This has not been a good place for them. I've seen some terrible performances in Calgary over the years. I have no confidence in the Argos winning in that building. I think the Argos are the better team, but I think only slightly with the quarterback play they're getting, and I just don't know if that's going to be enough to overcome going to Calgary and getting a win off a team that just came off a flat performance in Ottawa last week. So I think Calgary wins this. My prediction is Calgary 20, Toronto 17. JB, how does this one go?
I unfortunately agree. Calgary's very good at home. Stupid Dr. Mayer is going to come out and be who he is. I think that it's going to be hard with all the film that teams have on the two-headed monster of Toronto's quarterback situation. You can't. I mean, there's only so long you can get by with magic tricks, and I think that the league is onto it. I think it's going to be a big problem. I mean, defensive touchdowns, special teams touchdowns, maybe that's their only path to success. But I think I'm going to go with Calgary. Calgary 21, Toronto 12.
Whoa, yeah, that's Man, if they put in 12 points after getting 9 points of offense last week.
Well, I just don't see going on the road to Calgary as the solution
It's not
to
good.
the
I know.
offensive problems.
No, it's terrible. BC is also like that. That's also a place I don't enjoy watching the Argos. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. JB, it is time for Put Me Down for 20. And this is the segment where we put golden fleeces on the line every week, 20 of them. We started with 200 golden fleeces on the year, and I am currently at 244 and a half golden fleeces after a 2-0 week last week. JB, you are back under that 200 mark at 197, but it's a respectable number. Breaking even in this venture is certainly respectable. And I do want to tell you, listeners, don't take anything that we say seriously. Certainly never bet anything that you're not happy to lose as the cost of entertainment. And if you are going to bet, don't take our advice for it. This is a segment for fun. As you can see, JB lost all his golden fleeces last year. And so that should be as big a warning as anything. So with that said, I'm going to take honors this week from you, JB. So for my golden fleeces this week, my Argos related bet, I'm going to take the under. It's set right now at 49.5, and I just don't think, like, neither Calgary or Toronto's offense looked like it could put up half of that last week. And I think both defenses are pretty good. So that number just seems high. So under 49.5 for 10 of my golden fleeces. And my other golden fleeces will go on Ontario Wilson under 64.5 receiving yards in the Winnipeg BC game. That's coming up tomorrow night. And BC is adding Lucky Whitehead to the mix. I think that is going to kind of redistribute how they work their American receivers. And I do think they're going to want to take shots to him. I do think Zach Collaros would be happy to see Lucky back in Winnipeg and see what they can do together. So I think if there's an odd man out here, it might be Wilson. So I'm going to take an under 64.5 for me there. What are your two wagers this week? Where are your golden fleeces going?
I have to be honest. I looked at Mayer 2+ touchdowns, but I won't pick an opponent. I'm going to go Janarian Grant plus 240 anytime touchdown. I think special teams touchdowns are always a thing. I don't think Calgary special teams are elite. Certainly their punt return group is not great. So I like Janarian on a punt return touchdown.
All right. And how are you flushing your remaining 10?
I can't quit. I can't quit Winnipeg. And I cannot quit them. I got them 162 on the money line. Vegas has quit Winnipeg. But I've got Winnipeg at home. I mean, home dogs? No, say it ain't so, Joe.
It is a good price, like plus 162 at home for Winnipeg. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers with Zach Collaros out there and Brady Oliveira out there and adding Lucky Whitehead.
Not only home dogs with juice.
Yeah, a lot. It's yeah, but that said, I don't know. All right, let's get to our CFL picks for this week. I haven't even done the tallies for this week. I'm so far off here, but it was not a bad week for me last week. I think I ended up. Did I end up 3? Oh no. I ended up 3-1 last week. The one I lost was I had Calgary over Ottawa, and you ended up 2-2 because you had Saskatchewan. So you were 2-2 on the week, and so
yes, my Elks always come through for me.
Yeah, so I maintain my lead in our season series by 3. But let's get into this week's pick. So. BC at Winnipeg. I know home dog and everything else. I'm taking the BC Lions. They're coming off a bye. They have looked like the best team in the league most weeks. If it's not Montreal, it's been BC. So I will take them over the Blue Bombers.
Never doubt the heart of a champion.
All right. So can I write you down for Winnipeg?
You can write me down for Winnipeg.
All right. Winnipeg is in. Montreal at Hamilton. I'm taking Montreal. Looks like Cody Fajardo is going to come back this week and play. That's early. He wasn't expected to come off the 6th game. He was on the 6th game for like 1 game. And
yeah, well, I think Cody Fajardo watched the end of that game like, oh, I'm feeling a lot better, coach.
Yeah, put me in there. And so he might be back, but even if he's not, I would take them over Hamilton. I know Hamilton looked excellent at Edmonton. It's not the same thing when you go from, and that's one of the things too, like going from playing Edmonton to going to play Montreal is a little bit of a cold shower there. So I think Montreal is going to win that game easily.
Oh, I got Hamilton.
You got.
I like them.
Okay.
I think the Toronto game sparked something in them. I think Fajardo is coming back because he is afraid that they may have discovered a star at backup quarterback, and suddenly he's ready to rock. I don't think he's totally ready to play. And I like Hamilton's defensive line. I like their new swagger. I like them at home.
All right. I will happily write that down. Edmonton at Saskatchewan. Trey Ford is going to start this week.
Yes.
We've been waiting for this. I'm excited about it. I can't wait to watch it. Saskatchewan's going to win this football game.
I only wish it was in Edmonton.
Yeah, I know. But this is not like Ford is great. I really like him as a quarterback. Quarterback is not the problem in Edmonton. That was not the problem. McLeod Bethel-Thompson, aside from the last 2 weeks where he's clearly been banged up, he's been playing really good football. Last 2 weeks he's been injured. Ford should have been in for those last two games, really. But it's not going to be enough. Saskatchewan's defense is so good. I think Ford is going to make it exciting. I can't wait to watch it. But I don't think it results in an Edmonton win in Saskatchewan. They've done it before. I don't see it happening this week.
No, I also don't believe in Edmonton, so I have Saskatchewan.
And Toronto, Calgary. I've already picked Calgary. Are you sticking with that, or are you hedging again, JB? What are you calling on your picks?
That's a nice hedge, isn't it? You know what? I am going to hedge on that.
This is the most this is. You shouldn't be allowed to hedge like this. You picked Calgary. Hedge. It wasn't even in your bets. It was in your predictions. You predicted.
Put me in for a hedge there. Hey, these are separate competitions, separate rules. I'm gonna take your Toronto Argonauts to sneak out a win with a special teams touchdown and a defensive touchdown, and that we get bad mayor.
This is absurd. In your prediction, you predicted Calgary would win by 9, and now you picked Toronto.
I predicted two possible paths, and I'm simply embracing both. Good mayor, bad mayor.
Yeah, this is not. I don't know. We're gonna have to make this is a loophole that you're trying to exploit so that you at least win one of our competitions somewhere in here. I don't know if I.
In the off season, you'll have to talk to the competition committee.
Yeah, we're definitely going to close this loophole because this is ridiculous. This is making a mockery of this CFL picks segment. If your picks weren't doing it on their own in the first place. Any last thoughts, JB, before we sign off here and prepare for Toronto, Calgary?
I want to say a quick happy birthday to my good friend Charlie.
All right. Happy birthday, Charlie, from all of us at X's and Argos, but especially JB. And that will just about do it for us on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe, foe, foe.